If you're thinking about buying a home in the Tampa Bay area in 2026, I want you to forget almost everything you've heard about the crazy real estate market we experienced just a few years ago, because the Tampa Bay market has changed. The days when buyers routinely had to make an offer the first day of a house hit the market, waived contingencies, offer tens of thousands of dollars over asking price, and hope they were the winning bidder, for the most part, that's not the market we're dealing with today. But here's what's interesting. That doesn't necessarily mean Tampa Bay has suddenly become a bad real estate market. What it means is that we're returning to a market where buyers can actually be buyers again. You can compare properties. You can negotiate. You can ask for repairs. You may be able to negotiate closing costs. You may even be able to get a seller to help buy down your interest rate. And in certain parts of Tampa Bay, you may have considerably more leverage than you've had in years. But, and this is extremely important, not every part of Tampa Bay is behaving the same way. South Tampa isn't Pasco County. Downtown St. Petersburg isn't Wesley Chapel. Clearwater Beach isn't Land O'Lakes. And a 40-year-old condominium is an entirely different purchase from a brand new single-family home. So today, I'm going to break down what I believe every buyer needs to know about the Tampa Bay real estate market in 2026. And we're going to cover the three major counties I work in. That's Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, and Pasco County. So stay with me, because toward the end, I'm also going to give you what I consider the biggest opportunities and the biggest mistakes for Tampa Bay buyers right now. Hi everybody, I'm Mike with RE/MAX Alliance Group and the M&M Selection Group. I've lived in the Tampa Bay area for more than 5 decades, and one thing I've learned is that Tampa Bay is constantly changing. But the changes we've seen in our real estate market over the last few years have been extraordinary. We went from an extremely competitive pandemic-era market with very little inventory and historically low mortgage rates to a completely different market. Today, buyers are dealing with higher borrowing costs, more inventory in many categories, higher insurance costs, and much greater awareness of flooding and storm exposure. At the same time, Tampa Bay continues to attract people because of our lifestyle, our employment opportunities, the beaches, the boating, the sports, entertainment, and the overall growth of the region. So the question isn't simply, is Tampa Bay a good place to buy? The better question in 2026 is, where should I buy? What should I buy? And how do I take advantage of this changing market? So let's get to it. Tampa Bay isn't one real estate market. This may be the single most important thing I want you to take away from this video. When someone tells you the Tampa Bay market in real estate is up, or the Tampa Bay real estate market is down, my first question to them is, where are you talking about? Because Tampa Bay is a collection of dozens of individual markets. Let's start with Hillsborough County. You have in Hillsborough County, South Tampa, Downtown Tampa, West Chase, Carrollwood, Brandon, Riverview, Apollo Beach, Lithia, Fishhawk, New Tampa, and many other communities. Now let's cross across the bay. Let's go across the bay into Pinellas County. Now we're talking about St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Palm Harbor, Dunedin, Safety Harbor, Largo, Seminole, and the Gulf beaches. Just go north a little bit to Pasco County and you've got Wesley Chapel, Land O'Lakes, Trinity, Odessa, and the Lutz area. then cross the county lines into Hudson and Newport Richey and the rapidly developing communities along the State Road 54 corridor. Those markets can behave very differently. Even within the city of Tampa, recent 2026 data illustrates this normalization. Tampa's median sale price was roughly $443,000 during the period ending in May, slightly below the same period a year ago. Homes were taking about 41 days to sell. That's a very different environment from the frenzy we experienced several years ago. So don't buy a house based on a national headline, and don't even buy one based on a Tampa Bay headline. Look at the neighborhood, look at the property type, look at the comparable sales, and look at the days on market. Don't forget to look at all the price reductions that have been going on, and most importantly, look at what's actually selling, but not simply what's listed. So let's start with Hillsborough County. This is where you'll find the urban core of Tampa and some of Tampa Bay's strongest employment centers. And Hillsborough gives buyers an enormous variety of choices. If you're looking at South Tampa, for example, you're dealing with a mature market where location and land can be extremely valuable. Neighborhoods such as Hyde Park, Palmacia, Sunset Park, Beach Park, Davis Island, and the areas surrounding Bayshore Boulevard can command significant premiums. In these areas, buyers need to understand something very important. Two houses located only a few blocks apart can have dramatically different values. Why? Well, there's numerous reasons. Some of them include the school zones they're in, the flood zones, the lot size, of course, elevation. That's going to make a big difference in your insurance costs. Waterfront access, the age of the house, renovation quality, if it has been renovated, and even on the street itself, does it flood? That's why looking at an online estimate and assuming that's what a property is worth can get you into trouble. Now let's talk about downtown Tampa. Downtown Tampa is also undergoing a major transformation. Water Street, Tampa, the Riverwalk, Channelside, and continued development around the urban core have changed what downtown living looks like. For condo buyers, there are opportunities, but you have to evaluate the building as carefully as the individual unit. I'll come back to condos in a minute because that's a major subject in 2026. Brandon and Riverview move east and southeast, and buyers can generally get more house for their money. Brandon and Riverview continue to provide access to Tampa while offering more suburban housing choices at a more affordable price. But commute times becomes important. A house can look close to downtown on a map. That doesn't mean the commute feels close at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. Now let's go to New Tampa. New Tampa remains attractive to buyers looking for master plan communities, newer homes, and suburban amenities. But again, compare HOA fees, CDD fees, if there are any, insurance costs, and commute times. The purchase price is only one component of affordability. What Hillsborough buyers should know in 2026, I would not automatically assume that the asking price is the selling price. Recent Tampa data shows average homes selling around 3% below list price. That's meaningful. On a $700,000 home, 3% represents $21,000. Now that doesn't mean you're automatically going to get $21,000 off of every home. A beautifully renovated home in a desirable South Tampa neighborhood that's priced correctly may still attract multiple offers. But an overpriced house that's been sitting for 60 or 90 days, well, that's a completely different conversation. Now let's cross the bay into Pinellas County. Pinellas is fascinating because land is limited. Can't talk. You're on a peninsula. There's simply not an unlimited amount of land available for development. And within Pinellas County, you have several completely different markets. Let's start with downtown St. Petersburg. Downtown St. Pete has changed dramatically over the last 15 to 20 years. Today, you've got restaurants, museums, waterfront parks, nightlife, the St. Pete Pier, and a growing luxury condominium market. Recent 2026 data showed St. Petersburg performing differently from Tampa, with a median sale price around $478,000 during the period ending in May and stronger year-over-year pricing. That's exactly why I keep saying there is no single Tampa Bay market. Let's talk about Clearwater. It tells another story. Recent data shows a median price around $405,000, but homes were taking longer to sell, around 56 days compared to 46 a year ago. That extra market time can create opportunities for buyers. When a seller has been sitting on the market for 50, 60, or 90 days, the negotiation can be very different from the negotiation on day 3. Let's talk about the beaches. The Pinellas County beaches. You're talking Clearwater Beach, Bel Air Beach, Indian Rocks Beach, where you can Airbnb just about anything, Indian Shores, Reddington Beach, Madeira Beach, and you've got Treasure Island and the famous St. Pete Beach. These are lifestyle markets, but if you're buying near the Gulf on water or on waterfront property, do your due diligence. It needs to go to another level. You need to understand flood zones, elevation again, that's a big one, insurance, previous storm damage, was there any from Helene and Milton, permitting, seawalls, that's a big expense if you have to put a new one in, docks, and the age of the roof, windows and doors, are they hurricane resistant? And investment property, you got to know about short-term rental regulations. Never assume that because the house next door is being rented weekly, that your property automatically can be. Municipal rules can change dramatically from one community to another. Pasco County may be one of the most interesting stories. So now let's go north. Pasco County has become one of the most interesting parts of the Tampa Bay growth story. Why? Land and affordability. As Hillsborough and Pinellas become increasingly expensive, development has continued pushing north. Let's look at Wesley Chapel. 20 years ago, Wesley Chapel looked very different. Today, you've got major residential developments, shopping, restaurants, healthcare, schools, and entertainment. Then you have Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes has attracted considerable attention from relocating families and buyers looking for more space and value while maintaining access to Tampa. And then you have communities stretching across the State Road 54 corridor through Trinity and toward western Pasco. For buyers, Pasco often provides something that's increasingly difficult to find in Hillsborough and especially Pinellas. Newer construction and more house for the money. But there's a trade-off. If you work in Tampa, hey, what's your commute? What are the CDD fees, if any? What about the HOA fees? What's planned around that community? Is that open field behind your house? Is it going to remain an open field? Or is there a 500 home development already approved? These are questions buyers need to ask. New construction in Pasco is where it's happening because it's availability to land. Builders have inventory. National builders have increasingly used incentives and price reductions to move completed homes in this higher rate environment. That can mean closing cost assistance, mortgage rate incentives, upgrade packages, or price adjustments. So if you're shopping resale in Wesley Chapel or Land O'Lakes, we need to know what the builders nearby are offering, because that's your competition. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room: interest rates. Mortgage rates are still really not that high, but compared to the way they were, the ultra low mortgage rates of the pandemic era changed buyer behavior dramatically. People focused heavily on the purchase price because borrowing money was extraordinarily inexpensive. That's no longer the case. In the summer of 2026, 30-year mortgage rates have remained around the mid 6% range. That changes affordability. But here's where I think buyers sometimes make a mistake. Many of them say, "Hey, I'm going to wait until the rates drop." Okay, I totally get that. But what happens if the rates drop significantly and thousands of other buyers come to the same conclusion? Demand can and will increase. Competition can increase. People have been waiting in the wings for a while, and prices can respond upward. So rather than trying to perfectly time interest rates, I prefer to ask, can we make the numbers work on the right property today? And can we negotiate something from the seller? You can always refinance. Maybe instead of asking for another $10,000 off the price, we negotiate a seller credit that can be applied toward closing costs or an interest rate buy down, subject, of course, to your lender's rules. Sometimes improving the financing produces more immediate benefit than simply reducing the purchase price. That's why your realtor and your lender should be communicating before you make the offer, not after. Insurance and flood risks are now part of the purchase price. If you're moving to Florida from another state, pay very close attention to this section. In Tampa Bay, I don't believe you should look at the purchase price of a property without also understanding the potential insurance cost. Essentially, if you're looking near the water, you're going to need to look at that closely. Before your inspection period expires, you want to understand what will homeowners insurance cost, is flood insurance required, what flood zone is the property in, what's the elevation, how old is the roof, does the home have impact resistant windows or some sort of hurricane protection, how old are the electrical and plumbing systems, has the property experienced previous flood or storm damage, and what documentation is available for repairs. FEMA's flood insurance pricing methodology, it's called Risk Rating 2.0, evaluates property-specific flood risk rather than relying only on the flood zone label. So two homes that appear very similar can have very different insurance situations. This becomes particularly important in Pinellas County and waterfront portions of Hillsborough. A waterfront home may look like a tremendous deal, but suppose one property costs several $1,000s more per year to insure than another. Over 10 years, hey, that's real money. So in 2026, I tell buyers, don't just qualify for the mortgage, qualify for the entire cost of ownership, the mortgage, the taxes, the homeowner's insurance, flood insurance if it's applicable, HOA fees, and are there any CDD fees? How about maintenance of the property? And condominium fees if you're buying a condo. That's your real monthly housing cost. Condo buyers have to do more homework. This is another huge issue in Tampa Bay. Florida condominium buying has changed. After changes to Florida law, milestone inspections and structural integrity reserve studies, often called SIRS, have become critical parts of condo due diligence for applicable buildings. Florida law requires qualifying residential condominium associations with buildings of 3 habitable stories or more to complete structural integrity reserve studies at least every 10 years. And reserve funding has become much more important. Why should a buyer care? Because you don't want to buy a $500,000 condo and discover afterwards that the association has major structural work coming and inadequate reserves to pay for it. That could potentially mean special assessments on higher monthly fees. So when I'm looking at an older condo with a buyer, I don't want to simply see the unit. I want to know about the building. I want to look at such things as the association's financials, the budget, reserve funding, milestone inspection information, structural integrity reserve studies, current and proposed special assessments, association meeting minutes, insurance. There's so much, including any pending litigation were disclosed, and planned capital improvements. A beautifully remodeled kitchen doesn't compensate for a financially unhealthy condominium association. Remember that. You're not simply buying Unit 1204. You're buying into the financial condition of the entire building. This is especially important throughout Pinellas County, Clearwater, the beaches, St. Petersburg, and older condominium communities throughout Tampa Bay. Buyers have negotiating power again. Now here's the good news. Buyers have negotiation power again in many situations. Not everywhere, and not on every house, but considerably more than during the peak frenzy, that's for sure. Recent Tampa data shows homes selling on average below asking price, while a substantial portion of listings have experienced price reductions. So what can we potentially negotiate? Well, let's talk about it. There's the purchase price, as always, closing costs, repairs, there's usually some. Rate buy-down assistance is a possibility. Of course, home warranties are always there. Closing date. Do you want to extend it, or do you want to make a quick closing date? Furniture on certain properties, and sometimes other terms that matter to the buyer. But here's the mistake I don't want you to make. Don't automatically assume that making a low offer just because the market has softened. There is a difference between negotiating and losing the right property over an unrealistic offer. If a house is worth $800,000 and it's listed at $799,000 and 5 buyers want it, offering $700,000 because you heard it's a buyer's market probably isn't a great strategy. But if that same property is listed at $899,000, it's been sitting for 100 days and has already had 2 price reductions, now we have something to talk about. Days on the market matter, price history does matter, comparable sales matter, seller motivation always matters, and that's where having somebody who understands the local market becomes important. So Mike, people ask me, where are the opportunities in 2026? Well, I see several. Opportunity number 1, homes that have been sitting. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with the property. It was simply overpriced when it hit the market. After 60, 90, or 120 days, buyers assume something must be wrong with it. That's when I start asking questions. Opportunity number 2, new construction, especially in Pasco and parts of Hillsborough. Builder incentives can be significant, but you still want representation. The salesperson in the builder's sales center represents the builder. You should have someone looking out for your interest. Opportunity number 3, condominiums. I think there can be opportunities here for educated buyers, but you've got to separate financially healthy buildings from buildings facing significant financial or structural challenges. The headline, Florida condos are in trouble, is far too simplistic. The individual building matters. So let's talk about opportunity number 4, luxury. Luxury real estate doesn't always follow the broader market. A unique waterfront property in Davis Island or Sunset Park or Bel Air can behave very differently from a typical suburban home. The higher the price point, the smaller the buyer pool becomes. And when luxury inventory sits, a well-qualified buyer may have substantial negotiating power. Opportunity number 5, properties other buyers overlook. Dated kitchens, old flooring, bad paint colors, poor listing photos. Gosh, I see that all the time. Overgrown landscaping. Those things can scare away buyers. But they're cosmetic, folks. I'd rather find a structurally sound house in a great location that needs cosmetic improvements than a beautifully staged home in the wrong location. You can replace countertops. You can't move the lot. So let me leave you with 7 rules. Number 1, don't treat Tampa Bay as one market. Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco are different, and individual neighborhoods within those counties can be completely different. Number 2, get your financing organized before you shop. Know your payment and understand how different interest rate scenarios affect it. Number 3, get insurance quotes early, especially for waterfront, coastal, and older properties. Number 4, understand flood risk before you fall in love with that house. Flood zone, elevation, and actual insurance costs do matter. Number 5, if you're buying a condo, investigate the association, not just the unit. Financial health matters. Number 6, negotiate intelligently. That is in the hands of your real estate agent. Use days on the market, comparable sales, property condition, and seller motivation. Number 7, think long term. I wouldn't recommend buying a home simply because you think it'll be worth 20% more next year. Buy because the property fits your lifestyle, your finances, and your long-term goals. So has the Tampa Bay real estate market changed? Absolutely. But I actually think that's creating opportunities for buyers who know what they're looking for. You do have a lot more choices. You often have more time to make decisions. You may have more negotiating power on certain homes, and you're no longer competing against 20 other buyers on every property that hits the market. But today's market requires something different. It requires information, because buying the right property in the right neighborhood at the right price can make an enormous difference. And that's where my team and I come in. I've lived in this Tampa Bay area market for more than 5 decades. I've lived on both sides of the bay, Pinellas and Hillsborough. And whether you're looking in Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, or Pasco County, my goal isn't simply to show you houses. It's to help you understand where you're buying and what you're buying and whether it makes sense for you. So whether you're moving in 9 days or 9 months, give my team and me a call. I'm Mike with the RE/MAX Alliance Group and the M&M Selection Group. And if you're thinking about moving anywhere in the Tampa Bay area, we'd love the opportunity to help you. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications, because we're constantly talking about Tampa Bay real estate, waterfront properties, luxury homes, new construction, and the communities that make this such a great place to live. And leave me a comment below. If you were buying in Tampa Bay today, which would you choose? Hillsborough, Pinellas, Pasco, maybe even Sarasota or Manatee counties just to the south. I'd love to hear your answer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.